You know that feeling when you're utterly, completely alone? I'm not talking about loneliness. I'm talking about solitude. The profound, ringing silence that only exists in the deep wilderness, far from the hum of highways and the glow of streetlights. It's a silence I used to crave, a peace I spent years seeking out. I'm a seasoned backpacker, or at least I was. My name is Alex, and this story is the reason I haven't set foot in the deep woods since the autumn of 2018. My best friend Mark and I had planned this trip for months. Our destination was the Western Uplands Trail in Algonquin Provincial Park, Ontario. It's a brutal, beautiful beast of a trail, a loop that cuts through some of the most remote and rugged backcountry in eastern Canada. We'd chosen the longest route, a 5-night trek in late October. We wanted the fiery spectacle of the fall leaves, the crisp air, the complete absence of other people. We got all of that, and we got something else. The first 2 days were perfect. The weather was cold but clear. The trails were carpeted in a crimson and gold crush of maple leaves, and the only sounds were the crunch of our boots, the wind in the towering white pines, and our own easy laughter. We saw a moose grazing in a distant pond, its breath pluming in the cold air. It felt like we had the entire universe to ourselves. On the afternoon of the third day, we reached our designated campsite on the shores of a large, unnamed lake. The map showed it as a single, isolated site, tucked away on a peninsula, which was exactly what we wanted. We set up our tent, gathered firewood, and filtered water as the sun began its early descent, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. That's when we heard it. The first time, it was so faint we both stopped what we were doing and just listened. It was a sound that didn't belong. A melody. It was a whistle. It was clear, precise, and eerily tuneful. It wasn't the absent-minded puffing of air through lips. This was practiced, almost musical. A series of 5 or 6 notes repeating. It was too far away to make out the tune, but it was unmistakably a human whistle. "Other hikers?" Mark said, a note of disappointment in his voice. We'd been savoring our isolation. I shrugged. Must be. Sounds like it's coming from the other side of the lake, miles away. We went back to our tasks, but the sound continued, on and off, for the next hour. As the light faded, it began to grate on my nerves. It was just constant. The same sequence of notes, over and over. There was no joy in it. It was mechanical, like a recording on a loop. Darkness falls fast and hard in the backcountry that time of year. Soon, the only light was from our crackling fire, a tiny bubble of warmth in an ocean of black. We cooked our dehydrated meals, made coffee, and tried to ignore the whistle, which had finally stopped as full night took hold. The silence that replaced it was somehow worse. It felt expectant. We were sitting on logs, staring into the flames when the sound came again. But this time, it was different. It was close, not across the lake, not even 100 yards away. Just outside the ring of firelight, the same 5-note sequence, clear, piercing, and freezing cold. Mark and I snapped our heads up, our eyes meeting in shared alarm. Every rule of the wilderness screams that large predators don't whistle. Bears don't whistle. Wolves don't whistle. Moose certainly don't whistle. "Hello?" Mark called out, his voice tight. "Who's out there?" The whistle stopped. The silence that answered was absolute and heavy. The normal night sounds, the peepers, the wind, had all died. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, from the same spot, maybe a little closer, the whistle came again. The same tune. It felt like a response, a mockery. A primal fear, cold and sharp, lodged itself in my spine. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. "Maybe it's some jerk trying to scare us," I whispered. trying to convince myself. My hand had already found the cool metal of the hunting knife I kept on my belt. "At the ass end of nowhere on a Wednesday night," Mark whispered back, his eyes wide and fixed on the tree line. Why? And how did they get so close without us hearing them? He was right. We'd heard nothing. No footsteps on the dry leaves, no rustling of brush. It was as if the source of the sound had just materialized there. The whistle came a third time, closer still. It was just beyond the first line of trees now. I could hear the faint intake of breath before the notes, a wet, human sound. We both shot to our feet. Mark grabbed a large burning branch from the fire, holding it aloft like a torch. "We've got a weapon!" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. "Show yourself or get the hell out of here." The whistle stopped mid-note. And then, we heard the footsteps. They weren't trying to be quiet. It was a slow, deliberate, crunching walk through the leaves. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was circling our campsite, just beyond the light. We spun around, trying to track it, the firebrand and my knife held out in shaking hands. "Who are you?" I screamed, the sound raw and terrified in my throat. The footsteps stopped. They were now directly between us and the trail that led back into the woods. Our only way out. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a low guttural sound reached us. It wasn't a whistle. It was a wet, choking laugh. It was the most horrifying sound I have ever heard. There was no humor in it, only a vile, ancient malice. That sound broke us. There was no discussion. In a frantic, silent panic, we moved. We didn't pack. We didn't douse the fire. We grabbed our 2 backpacks. Thank God they were right there. And without a second thought, we plunged into the black woods in the opposite direction from the sound, off the trail and into the unknown. We ran. Branches lashed at our faces, roots grabbed at our ankles. We didn't have headlamps on. We'd been too scared to think, and turning them on would have felt like painting targets on our backs. We ran blind, driven by a terror so pure it overrode every instinct for self-preservation except flight. After what felt like an eternity of stumbling, falling, and scrambling back up, we collapsed, gasping for air, behind a giant fallen log. We listened, our hearts hammering against our ribs like they wanted to escape. Silence. Then, from far, far away, back in the direction of our campsite, the whistle started again. Faint, but unmistakable. The same 5 notes. It was still there. We huddled behind that log for hours, shivering in the cold, too terrified to speak or move. The whistle continued, on and off, a haunting serenade that pinned us in place. We couldn't go back towards it. We couldn't go forward because we were hopelessly lost. We were trapped. As the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the dense canopy, the whistle finally ceased. The normal sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the scolding of a red squirrel, slowly returned. It felt like a spell breaking. We were bruised, scratched, and freezing cold. Our tent, our sleeping bags, most of our food, all of it was back at the campsite. But there was no force on Earth that could have made us go back. Using a compass and a soggy, torn map from my pack, we spent the entire day bushwhacking our way south, hoping to hit a trail. We were dehydrated and shaking with adrenaline, crash, and fear. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made us jump. We heard whistling in the wind, and the call of a bird. Our minds were shattered. Just before dusk, we stumbled, exhausted and broken, onto a Park Service fire road. An hour later, a ranger in a truck found us, half delirious and clinging to each other. He took one look at our faces and didn't ask any questions until he had us back at the ranger station, wrapped in blankets and drinking hot chocolate. We told him everything. The whistling, the laugh, the footsteps, He listened patiently, his expression grim. When we finished, he was quiet for a long time. "You're not the first," he said finally, his voice low. "We get a report like this every few years, mostly from the remote sites on the western side. Hunters, backpackers, they all report the same thing. A whistler. It follows people. It harries them. We've searched, found abandoned campsites just like yours. Never found a trace of anyone." "What is it?" I asked, my voice a whisper. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "There are old stories, older than the park. The First Nations tribes here have tales of a spirit, a mimic, a thing that lures people deep into the woods with familiar sounds until they're lost forever. They called it, well, it doesn't matter. We file it under unexplained. I'm just glad you boys made it out." We did make it out, but it followed us. Not literally, I don't think. But sometimes, even now, back in my apartment in Chicago, with the sirens and the traffic and the sounds of a living city all around me, I'll hear it. The distant, fragmentary echo of a whistle on the edge of my hearing. It's probably just a kid on the street, or a trick of the wind through a window crack. I tell myself that. But I always lock the door, and I never, ever go into the woods. I still wake up in a cold sweat, that same 5-note sequence echoing in my skull. I've tried to write it out, to make sense of it. It's always the same. A high note, 2 descending notes, a low note, and a final rising note that sounds like a question. It sounds like this. What about you? Have you ever been deep in the woods and heard a sound that just didn't belong? A voice calling your name when no one was there? A whistle from the shadows? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones we don't tell alone.